Hi, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. This is the last council meeting before Thanksgiving, and when George Washington commemorated Thanksgiving as a national annual holiday, it was to give thanks to God. And I am very thankful to God that the people of the city, you, have entrusted me and given me the opportunity to serve you and to make a difference for Plano. We moved in today to our preliminary open meeting. We had a relatively light agenda. In the preliminary open meeting, we moved the March 14th City Council meeting to March 15th because the Monday, March 14th was the last day of Plano ISD spring break. So we're moving our meeting to the 15th to enable everybody, including council, to participate in spring break fully and participate in the council meeting fully. We had an environmental health and sustainability departmental report. Interestingly, there are 28,000 hospitalizations and 3,000 deaths per year from foodborne illnesses. And I estimate there are at least 20 deaths per year from Jason-borne related causes, not foodborne related causes. Get it? Jason-borne, foodborne. Is this thing on? Oh, come on. We reviewed the mosquito traps that we have throughout the city. We test them primarily for West Nile virus, some other things. And we reviewed some of the volunteer cleanup efforts in our waterways. A number of volunteers cleaned up, I think it was 115 bags of trash in our waterways. So number one, thank you to all the volunteers who are helping keep our city clean. Number two, to everybody who left the 115 bags worth of trash in the waterways, please stop. Thank you. We had an update on the noise ordinance. So the last time we discussed this, which was several weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, there was a proposal brought forth to create a permitting process for entertainment venues to get a permit to extend the hours through which they can exceed the normally allowable noise levels. I said at the time that I would be comfortable with that if and only if there were a way for residents to voice their opposition, because simply permitting something doesn't make the problem go away if there is a problem. So that is intact, and we gave the appropriate direction. So anybody within 500 feet of an entertainment venue who's applying for a permit will be noticed. HOAs will be noticed within 1,500 feet. Now, part of the big issue with the noise came up about Legacy Hall and Windrose Tower. And I did the measurements on Google Math. I didn't take a tape measure out myself and do it, but Google Maps, not Google Math. What am I thinking? The stage from Legacy Hall is further than 500 feet away from Windrose Tower, but it's causing an obvious noise issue with Windrose Tower. So I want to make sure that people within the affected area are noticed appropriately. So that's going to be coming back to council as a formalized ordinance update to vote on. And then we had a discussion about our sales tax. Now, we actually collected $3.5 million more in sales tax than we had planned for, which is a great thing, but with a surplus, we need to figure out what is most appropriate to do with it. There were three proposed uses. One is tree removal. So at my urging, we created a rainy day fund a while back. And I want to see us seed that rainy day fund with surpluses. Now, the dead tree removal necessitated by Snowmageddon, otherwise known as Winter Storm Uri, is exactly the type of thing that the emergency fund or the rainy day fund is for. It's for unforeseen circumstances. We couldn't have budgeted for this last fiscal year. We didn't know anything like this was going to happen. And yet a number of trees across the city have just died and now present a hazard. One of those trees fell in a creek and busted open a sewage main and pumped 100,000 gallons of raw sewage into, I think, White Rock Creek. And so that's really nasty. But it was not necessarily one of the dead trees, but that's the sort of thing that can happen. So a lot of these dead trees present a hazard. We don't want them to just not fall on sewage mains. We don't want them to fall on people, cars, houses, pets, etc. And so potential great expense will be incurred getting rid of all of those dead trees. So that's exactly the sort of thing the rainy day fund was supposed to provide for. So I do support taking some of that surplus and going ahead and spending it on the dead trees instead of going through the middleman of putting it into the rainy day fund first and then pulling it right out of the rainy day fund. A couple of the other uses that were proposed for it, which apparently are going to move forward, are to replace the vehicle canopies in covering public safety vehicles that were damaged in a hailstorm a couple of years back, and also new badge readers for the antiquated badge readers at City Hall. Now, these are things that were going to have to be done anyway, the canopies and the badge readers, and Anthony Riccadelli made the point that if we're going to spend the sales tax surplus on that, then let's reduce next year's budget commensurately so we're not just getting this extra money and simply spending it. Because I think the best things to do with that are to either put it in the rainy day fund or to buy down our debt, which ultimately is passed on as reduced property taxes to our taxpayers. So we moved into our regular meeting. We recognized David Maiorani, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing that, for his service on the Community Relations Commission. And a consent agenda item was pulled out. This had to do with the campaign finance recusal ordinance, which has been a topic of frequent discussion lately. So at the October 25th meeting, Council had a robust discussion during the preliminary open meeting about the campaign finance recusal ordinance, which was passed about a year ago, which says that if somebody has received more than $1,000 in campaign contributions from somebody with a material interest before council, where council is voting on it, then the council member should recuse themselves. There were several ideas brought to change, modify, strengthen, however you will, that ordinance. One of the ideas that Mayor Pro Tem Casey Prince brought was to time box it, to say the way the ordinance was originally written, it could go back to the beginning of time. So if somebody for instance, gave to a council member who served 2 terms as on council and then 2 terms as mayor, if somebody gave to that council member's first campaign, could be 16 years prior, then that would count toward the $1,000 or $1,000+ toward which they should recuse themselves. I personally don't care who received money 16 years ago, even really 10 years ago. What was proposed was 2 years, and at that meeting on October 25th, I said I think 4 years would be more appropriate because we serve 4-year terms. There was enough agreement with council to move forward with that, but then we went to the regular meeting, what I felt was kind of precipitously, and so I asked that we revisit a couple of the other ideas we had discussed and at least have a show of hands to see whether there was the will on the part of council to do anything with those. So a couple of those things were making it a Class C misdemeanor to violate the ordinance, putting what little teeth we could in it at the city level. Number 2 was to revise the language to make it applicable to PACs, and or at least explicitly applicable to PACs. And we never had the show of hands on that at the preliminary open meeting on October 25th, so I asked that those be brought back on November 8th so we could at least have the show of hands. We had the show of hands, there wasn't enough support to move forward with it, but at that time, where there had been support the prior meeting for extending the time boxing from 2 years to 4 years, then it was brought back and it was revised back to 2 years. So and then they said, okay, we'll bring that back as an ordinance next meeting. That meeting was tonight, and so that's what was pulled off the consent agenda. So to give you the backstory there. And the idea was that we were going to vote to amend the ordinance to change it to 2 years, time box it in 2 years. That ultimately ended up being tabled because both Mayor Pro Tem Casey Prince and Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Maria Tu were not in attendance at tonight's meeting. And so at least, well, obviously all of us, we all voted unanimously to table it, but there were enough council members saying that they felt that all of the council members should be present for that discussion. So that will presumably be coming back at the first council meeting in December. So keep an eye out on the agenda for that if you'd like to speak up about it. I still feel, and I said again tonight, as I said the first time a couple weeks ago and before that, that a 4-year running 4-year period would be most appropriate because we serve 4-year terms. So that'll be coming back up. We then adopted a youth program standards of care ordinance. This was required because under state law, we operate some of our Parks and Rec programs as what is technically considered a daycare. So by adopting that youth program standards of care ordinance, that allows us to not have to apply for a daycare permit as a city. And then we cast our votes for the Collin Central Appraisal District Board of Directors and the Denton Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. Now, we have significantly more votes for Collin County because most of Plano is in Collin County. So we cast our 297 votes for Carson Kincaid Underwood, who was our nominee a couple meetings back for the Collin Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. We cast our 13 whopping votes for the Denton Central Appraisal District Board of Directors to Roy Atwood. And then the meeting was concluded. I wish you all a very happy and blessed Thanksgiving. And I want you all, as I do, to bear in mind what you're most thankful for and enhance that and never let it go. Thank you very much. I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. God bless you all.